Welcome to Impact Investing, brought to you by the Supporters Fund. From the most multicultural city in the world, Toronto, Canada, I'm your host, Jeffery J.P. Potvin. Let's please welcome from the Apple capital of the United States, Redmond, Washington, Nataraj Sindam as a product manager for Microsoft with a podcast in the startup called the Startup Project. Welcome, Nataraj. It's a pleasure having you join us today.
Hey, thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I'm pretty excited. Oh, of course, I'm pretty excited about this conversation. One, because you're coming from big business, well, welcome to the startup side of things. We don't always get that. And two, you're heavy into AI, and you also have a fantastic podcast where you really dive into, I think, anything and everything to do with startup world, investors, you name it. So there's been a lot of learning there too. So I think there's a lot of things we're going to unpack today. But the way we like to start our show off is we want to dive into more of your background, where you've come from your university days, all the way through from your startups to, of course, where you are today. And then one thing about you that nobody would know.
Sure. So about me, I grew up in South India in a small town called Warangal. Most of people who visited India would know a town called Goa, which is a beach town and which is very famous tourist destination. That's where I went to college at one of the best universities in the country. I studied computer science and math, and then you know. So when I studied math, please don't expect to me to be good at addition and subtraction. That's not what we do in when we study math as a subject in school. It's mostly about solving hundreds and hundreds of theorems, um, and then so it's more theoretical mathematics than what conventionally people think about what math is. So that was a fun experience. And studying in Goa is itself also a fun experience because of kind of the place it was and it is. So I got then I got a sort of different entry into United States after that because a company called Epic Systems, which is the healthcare software company, which is probably used by 60 to 70% of US population indirectly. They might not know it, but they might be using it. So they actually hired me from school, and that's how I ended up in Madison, Wisconsin, one fine day in a winter morning, thinking about where I came and looking at the snow. I was like, how can I survive here? So that was a fun transition experience. Got used to the snow and sort of the Midwest weather. Worked there for a while. Got to interact with software, being employed in healthcare. That was sort of like my first exposure on how software can be leveraged. Uh, when you're a software developer, when you're studying computer science, you always have this view of developing software, but then when you see it in practice and in a space like healthcare technology, you sort of it opens your mind into what are all the possibilities. So that was a very interesting experience. As part of Epic, I got to travel and interact with some of the largest healthcare organizations because at Epic, when as a product developers, we are sort of required and encouraged to go and visit and see how our customers are using our software. So you stand by the doctors when they're using their software. You stand by the nurses. You stand by front desk staff and see how they're using Epic software because Epic is sort of like Microsoft for hospitals, large healthcare organizations, and they provide software from front desk to surgery to inpatient, outpatient, you name the department, Epic is used. So it was a really fun experience in terms of like understanding technology's impact in diverse sectors. Then in between, I did a small startup in e-commerce, which didn't really go well because I was trying to bring sort of cater Indian customers in the US and North America. We scaled it for a while, but then realized that marketing costs are way too high, and we didn't find a product market fit, and sort of shut it down. And then I got hired by Microsoft, where I still work. I was mainly working as a software developer, and then transitioned into being a product manager. In between that, I got interested into angel investing primarily because I wanted to start my own company. And that's how I got into angel investing and investing in general. And that led to me starting a podcast called Startup Project, because I want to stay in the ecosystem and sort of continue to become an expert, if not as at some time as a founder, but I also want to be in touch with the ecosystem and sort of understand what is happening, and sort of build my own network in the space. So that's why I started Startup Project, and it led me to being a venture partner at Incisive, and who we got connected through as well. And yeah, and one thing that people don't know about me is I regularly do CrossFit. Um, for the past 3 years, I'm doing CrossFit. It might not look at it, considering I look lean, and uh, yeah, but I used to be very lean before I started doing CrossFit. But yeah, that is probably one thing people don't know about me.
Well, that's a great story and a great background, and of course the CrossFit thing. We'll jump into that. That's obviously pretty exciting, and it gets your heart rate going up and down. So I'm going to say from the video, you look great. I can't tell if you look different 3 years ago than you are today, but I'm sure you're crushing the CrossFit side. Um, Now, to kind of go back and unpack some of the story you shared where you were going to university and where you grew up and where people would be more familiar with was Goa. I did spend some time in Goa in the last, I think it was a year ago I was there, going through India, spent a month there. I love India, by the way, but really enjoyed Goa. It is more of a tourist hub because everybody goes to Goa. That should almost be the tagline for India. It should be everybody goes to Goa because it doesn't matter who you are. Someone is in Goa that you would never think would be there. It is the Indian surfing community. So everybody is very chilled, laid back, and super nice and friendly. So I really enjoyed doing that, and I have many funny stories of going across that bridge, um, the big one.
Yeah,
I went the wrong way and on my moped as I was speeding along, and I ended up taking the bridge. And of course, on the other side were there were a few police there to charge me for driving on the bridge. So I said to them when they pulled me over because they were blocking the road and making me have to pay. I said, "Do you think I wanted to go across this bridge? I was so high up, the wind was coming so strong. I was like, I almost felt like I was going to fly down to the next bridge. I didn't want to be on here, so why are you charging me for my mistake?" They said, I didn't see a sign. And they had to show me pictures on their phone where the sign was. I'm like, I didn't see that sign. I still don't remember that sign. And even when I went back, I still didn't see that sign. So we ended up working out the details, but I said, I'm not paying you guys a penny, which I got them down to like $5, is unless you let me do a selfie with you guys, because no one will believe this. And they did a selfie with me. So it worked itself out. It was a great adventure. I advise you to take the lower bridge if you're on a bike. So outside of that, beautiful country. So now to kind of go back to, I guess, diving into the initial part where you were talking about kind of where you've come from. You were an engineer, and started to build out. You created your first company. You mentioned something that I really wanted to kind of dive into because this is one thing that maybe people don't emphasize enough, and maybe Microsoft does, but I think this was before your Microsoft time, and that was um, how you interact with the software, how your customers interact with the software. So before we dive into all the business side of things, that is so crucial to any startup or to any business, is that they always tend to just build. And maybe there's a in my mind I'm solving a problem, but I haven't spent enough time actually solving the problem with my customers and finding out what they like and dislike about their product. It's kind of like asking someone, which I do all the time, is what feedback can you give me on how I can improve the podcast? It's very much similar going through your software and saying, hey, I know we're early on, how can I watch you, how you interact with this? Have you found that throughout time and throughout the last duration of 10 years that you've been working in the startup space and now at Microsoft, has that always been true to how you operate? Because you're an engineer, you're just like to build, but do you find that you're still putting as much time into learning how people are using your product and spending time in the room interacting and watching them use it?
I mean, there's this phrase, right? Like, right now I'm a product manager. Like, I used to be a developer. But there's this phrase of like, whenever you're in a meeting as a product manager, you're really representing the customer. And even like when you're doing a startup or when you're building a product, I think one of the exercises that I often say people should do is just log out and not look at your product for a couple of days and create a new user profile in your own product, just to see the pain of the customer that who's now currently newly joined. Right, you almost have to forget your product and the expertise that you have in the product, and always observe new users how they are using the product to understand the complexity. Because if you're too close to the product, you're almost too familiar with it, and you're an expert in it. You know everything about it, so that sort of makes you feel that your product is simple to use and it's easy to use and you're solving everything. But I think taking a step back and looking at it in the lens of like what a first time user would think about, what would a user who never has the expertise, how are they looking at the product, or what are they trying to see. And today we have so many tools, like when we develop software, right, you can literally see which mouse click is happening, and each website today tracks sort of where the mouse is moving, and why didn't they click on the action button that you placed. You can clearly see that data, but it always helps to look. Product management is a lot about creativity, I would say. You have to like come up with these creative ideas on how to not engage with your product for a while and see it from a fresh lens and attack the problem from different sides. But yeah, I think that fundamental frame of reference of how your customers are interacting with product is one of the core tenets you need to have as a product manager. Doesn't matter if it is B2B or B2C.
No, I love that, and it is a creative position, and you're right. Taking that pullback or that stance that I need to try this all out again, even though if I was logged in for the last 3 years or 2 months, whatever that time period is, logging out and giving yourself some space to then go back and try it again to see what your experience was like, and was it just as easy as you first imagined it. I think sometimes we forget that we have to treat ourselves as a first time user, because we're more advanced, and it kind of pushes when you're pushing your product out. If you've got a million bells and whistles, how many of those bells and whistles are being used? Like in a car, as an example, we've got so much functionality into a car that you use 1% of. So is it overdoing it? And or is it because people just don't have the time, or they don't understand how to use half of the functions because they're so complicated to figure out? And if you were a product manager, would you pull back and come up with a different way to analyze that usage on that car?
There's this great line, I think, I forgot who said it, but like Japanese automobiles are made with the assumption that the users will never sort of maintain their car, but the German cars are created with the assumption that every 1 year you sort of do the maintenance. uh, so it's like you can put this in the product perspective as well. Like, how do you think about your user? Like, is he going to maintain all this? Because when you're designing an onboarding flow, or whenever you're designing something, you're expecting the user to do certain things, but the user is not always going to do certain things. So it's sort of like a perspective on how to think about your own user.
That's a really good analogy, because I remember when I was in a German car 20 years ago, you had to like crank things and push things. Like you had to get the car going to do what you wanted it to do. Obviously, they've enhanced it a lot more from that. But to your point, it was all about our people are going to work with the car. They're going to fix the car. They're going to do those things. And on the Japanese side, you can see the difference, because in Japan, everything is so perfect. Everything is fine lined, cleaned up, and it's done, so that you have no stress, no worries. And it makes sense, because they're like, this is how we want to operate. We want to take away all the heavy lifting so that you can enjoy your space. Well, the other one is we want you to interact with it, and we want you to make sure you have to be knowledgeable about how to operate this. So, to your point, you need to know your customer, which means that you need to spend more time learning what the customer's all about and what they're trying to achieve. And that comes from sitting in the chair and deciding who you're solving the problem for. And then how much work are they willing to put in this? Are they a doctor that needs to go fast and they want it right at their fingertips? Or is it a mechanic where they need to be operating inside the machine in order to make it functional, in order to get the outcome that they're looking for their customer? So, I think it's very critical to learn how that customer operates and who you're trying to service.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So now you've learned all of these things, and you're really focused in on your customer, and you're diving into learning how to be this better product manager and being able to be a spokesperson, as you said earlier, for your customer. And you went in and created your first company. and you said you worked through that and you decided, this isn't going to work. It's not catering. The focus isn't there, and we're not going to be able to scale it. What kind of were the signs that you learned? And is it a good thing that you had this product vision before, like that you knew how to run product so that you would shut this down quicker? Because you didn't, it wasn't 4 or 5 years of working on this company, it's a year. So is that really developed in your mind that, hey, I'm not hitting the focus I need in order to scale this, so I'm going to shut it down? What was the mindset that you learned before and during the startup?
So when we started that, I started with a friend, and the assumption was that we are going to cater to Indians living outside of India, but we're sort of bringing Indian designs. Like think of accessories to clothing to everything fashion, basically. um, and we were trying to acquire customers. It's an e-commerce business, obviously. um, so that was sort of like the thesis on what we are going to do. But then we quickly realized that all the customers that we are acquiring, obviously, once you start doing marketing and try to acquire users and try to make sales, what we realized is this is firstly a commoditized category, right? Fashion is such a commoditized business, and everything has become right now about how much Instagram ads or how much Facebook ads can you do, and how effectively can you do it. It's not really about the product itself, but 50% is product and 50% is marketing. Um, and if your product is not unique, if your product is fully commoditized, that will basically show up in your marketing cost. If you have a unique product, if you have something really that no one has done, if you're providing really a niche customer with a really niche use case, let's say you're providing apparel for a fisherman. I'm just picking a random example. Like, how does a niche look like, right? A specific type of footwear, for example, in CrossFit, there's this brand called Noble, which is used by all the CrossFit athletes, right? And they have because they're making shoes for lifting, not for running. So they have this flat shoe instead of like a curvature, which is designed for running. So that was their unique insight, and they scaled that brand, and that brand is like has a cult-like following within CrossFit community. So if you're not doing something very, very innovative, um, everything in e-commerce has become about marketing and how effectively can you leverage Facebook or Google marketing to get customers. So my we initially realized, I mean, within a couple of months into the business, we realized that hey, we are making sales, but we are making sales at loss. So there are two ways I could go at that point. Go and raise venture money and scale really up and see if we can turn that loss-making machine into a profit-making machine, or close it. And as we spent more on marketing, we realized that actually there's no one big customer insight that we gained is really about fashion, actually. So let's say take any average Indian. They might want to be Indian when they are in India, but when they're around a multicultural society like US, they're not trying to be more Indian, they're trying to be more multicultural. So whatever they like wearing it probably inside the home is not what they're like they like to wear outside the home. An example I would give is if you're in Seattle every Friday, people would wear Seahawks jerseys. They're not going to wear something Indian. Even Indians want to wear Seahawks jerseys. So the idea of fashion changes with the geography. So your customer is really not interested in the same things that he was interested when he was in India or when he was migrating. And there are still certain categories within the home that might be there, but we were not interested in pursuing that category. So at that point, okay, we said, okay, this is not a road we want to go. And I also have this belief, and I forgot, one of the entrepreneurs who came on my podcast said, which I've always sort of, use when I experiment with new ideas, is that, I wish someone had told me that great or good ideas sort of have instantly good feedback, and it doesn't have to be massive, but it will be either like a few set of customers are really, really passionate about your product, or you are getting really good traffic to your website. So you have these small signals which sort of really give a sense of confidence that hey, this is a worthy idea to pursue. And we thought that we didn't have those signals. It was all inorganic versus organic. So that's why we sort of decided that it's time to shut down. But the customer insight, so whatever experiment that we thought the customer, whatever hypothesis we had was obviously wrong. And markets, I always say whenever I advise any startup company these days, I always tell them that, hey, you are having a hypothesis. And whenever you're making a pitch deck, remember that making the pitch deck is also a truth seeking exercise. Don't come up with an idea and say that, I'll make a pitch for it. Instead of take a step back, think of the pitch as the process itself. Like making the pitch itself is about finding the right idea. It's about like how do you think about next 18 months. You're actually making a plan with the pitch itself. So often people think otherwise. They think they have an idea, and now we have to convert that into the pitch. But actually, it has to be opposite. You use the pitch itself to come up with the right idea or tweak your idea to make it right. So yeah, those are all like different lessons that I gained. I think it was a very useful experience. It also helped me transition into becoming a better product manager. It also acted as a proof point for me to tell people that, hey, why do you want to become a product manager? Like, what is your experience? Like, when you do something practical, you can show that, hey, this is how do you think about your customer? How do you think about your product? How do you think about marketing? Versus me just explaining the theory versus doing something actual. So it helped me in that sense.
I love it. And there's a couple of things I'm going to unpack there. And what I love that we just shared was that you emphasized unique and niche. And I think what the why I love that you broke this out is because you can tell a company all the time, go after a niche market. And niche in most people's mind is small. This niche thing is too small. I can't go after niche. I need to go after large. And they're like, well, niche really needs to be focused on is unique. So if you create a unique product, it allows you to become niche, which is hyper focused in this space, that it's a demand that people are looking for. To your point on the shoes, is that there was no CrossFit shoes, but there's hundreds of millions of people doing CrossFit. And they're looking for something that allows them to lift so it's flat and allows them to maneuver quickly. And that is what the value is that they're looking for. So they created a unique product inside of a niche sector which grew to be $100 million or $1 billion business. So I think there's a way to shape your mind around what unique and niche is and how you combine them together to create something large and open up a space. So there's probably other incumbents of now that have come in to compete because they see that there's such a high potential for shoes in this CrossFit world.
Yeah, I mean, Noble, I I tried to reach out to the founder and invest in it, but they were too big at that point. But CrossFit itself is like great brands are like cults. I don't know if you realize that, but I always I like the whole religion and cult analogies. Like I make them all the time. And great brands are like great cults, and eventually great brands become great religions. They transition from cults to religions, right? Cults are when 1,000 people are believing in their own stories, it's a cult. But when millions are believing, it's a religion. So Tesla, for example, in 2017, 16 was a cult. Now it's a religion. Apple is a religion, but Noble is still a cult. I would say because not people outside CrossFit don't know about Noble. There's a new shoe company called On. I don't know if you've seen. You might see your friends wearing ON shoes. It's penetrating. It's I think a $700 million business per year, but they're taking revenue share from Nike. It's still at a cult level, but it's pretty big cult, and it's getting to a place where it might become a religion and Nike might acquire them. Um, but always like great brands start out as cults and eventually become religions. But if you find that cultish behavior in any sort of section, like even Lululemon, for example, right? It used to be yoga audience, and then it slowly expanded, and now everyone wears it. So you always have this, especially in consumer brands, this cultish sort of signal, and not in a negative sense of the word cult, but I think of it as a positive sense. It represents this immense brand loyalty or passion for the product, right? Which you also see in the cult, in the cult, but you can sort of extrapolate that and associate it with the brand, and then it becomes a positive sense.
I love that analogy, the cult and religion. 100%. You have a small grouping, you're building, people love what you're doing. It starts to spread. The cult spreads across sharing the message, sharing why this is a value. People like that cool small esque brand. So like Apple was cool until it became not cool. So there's probably one where you become a religion and then you fall out of religion into something else, which is maybe where everybody becomes Kreitsu as a pun. Like they beat you up because you've got too big and you're not doing things the right way, or you're doing things too much on the profit side. So there's probably another sector to talk to. But I love the fact that you break it down by cult and religious, get to the point of being religious. And then I kind of, when you were sharing this, you meant on the pitch side, you call it the hypothesis. And I love that because the cult is like a hypothesis. It's, I'm working on something that I think is solving a problem. I'm going to keep changing the pitch. Every time I hear myself pitch it, I'm changing it. I'm modifying, modifying, modifying. And you keep getting better at that hypothesis because you get closer and closer to what scaling would look like if you could cookie cutter your business or you could turn it to a religion. So as soon as that shoe company became the religion, that's where the pitch deck stopped changing. Now we're good at this. We're the best at sales on this, and we can turn and convert everything really quickly. We're no longer hypothesizing on how we're going to do this. We're already doing it. We've now become a religion. Is that a fair statement?
Um, I wouldn't phrase it similarly, but I think you're sort of like to extend the cult analogy. Like when two people believe the same things, it's called love, and if 10 people believe it's cult, and like thousands of people believe it's a religion, right? So initially you're in love with your idea, so you have to convince yourself, and then you're convincing maybe one person. But then, yeah, you have to create your cult essentially. When you're creating the first 50% team, right? That is about creating cult. And you often see like when people write stories about Uber founder or WeWork founder, it's almost like a cult feeling. They explain it when it's a disaster, it's always like a cult. But even when it's a success, it's also like a cult. Like the biggest cult, I think, the cult leader was Jeff Bezos. I mean, he literally had 20 rules. For the longest time, he ran that company very differently, and he was a very strong cult leader. And that's not that's a compliment. It's not a it's not a negative term whenever I say it's a cult leader, right? Because you have to be a strong leader to create such a strong belief system, a particular idea. For in case of pitch, right? The problem I see often when founders start to like try to convince other people, they're always trying to force fit their idea into the structure of the pitch. But what they have to realize is, okay, you have a hypothesis, you're going into the market to see whether this hypothesis is correct. Even whoever is investing in you think that, okay, this hypothesis might work. And it would be better if you can iterate that hypothesis faster, as fast as possible, right? You are iterating that hypothesis. So you have to approach the mentality of, because often people have this idea that, oh, I saw this problem and I think it might be worth solving. But that's not true, right? That's not true. Your problem is your problem. Market might not value your problem at all. Your idea when you're using a venture scale problem is you want to have an idea that scales to $100 million business. At least that's the minimum to become a unicorn, right? Can you generate $100 million revenue? So that means even your idea has to iterate to get to a position that, okay, this can actually have $100 million revenue maybe in 5 years. So my point with the hypothesis is that you come up with a hypothesis that is big enough, that is something that market needs, and don't get attached with the idea that you started with. And often people get attached with the idea they started with, and they're trying to force fit in the pitch template that, hey, we'll do this way of go to market. Hey, I think, and that's where the story starts to break, because then they force fit the market slide of, total addressable market is some crazy number. And they have to choose pick a crazy number to convince venture capitalists that this is a worthy enough sector to invest in, large enough sector to invest in. But the fact is, um, we are only looking at $100 million revenue, really, right? That is the first step, and from there on, if you can get $100 million revenue size business, you will definitely find an ancillary business where you can scale to further $100 million more. So it's sort of like the idea of, try your truth seeking exercise, right? This is all a truth seeking exercise in the market, and think of it like that. So that means you might have to change your idea, change your thought process around the idea. What you thought is not really what market values, and you don't have to be so attached with your own idea of what it is. Like for example, I see like a great ML PhD researcher coming to me, but I see that they're looking at a very small problem because they've encountered in their personal life for some reason. Often it tends to like, okay, because we always tend to see these victory stories of because Airbnb founders saw this problem, it turned out to be big, good for them. But it's not always the case, right? Like a smaller problem is a smaller problem structurally. So unless you are seeing a path that this smaller problem is faced by millions of people and I can see really the path, and don't make up a vague idea that all people have this problem, right? So that is sort of like the point I sort of try to imbibe in early stage founders.
No, I love that, and I think if you tie a couple of other things that you shared there's two things I always kind of like to push on a founder when they're raising funds. You have two ways to sell yourself. You either sell the dream or you sell the data. The dream is your hypothesis of where this could possibly go and how big it can be. And your job as an investor is to decide, am I willing to risk at this early stage on this dream and this founder where you are, or the hypothesis that you're working with? The other side is that once you have the data, which is the metrics, you're now selling the data. You can't sell the dream anymore. You have to sell the data, which is how did the data prove? Did the hypothesis match to your data? Did you shift and focus? And I think that once you get into the data side, it changes. The dream is no longer there. It's the data that drives you to the direction you're taking. And if your direction is going into this larger, Amazon-esque world, and you've got such a high threshold, then how focused are you in this model that you all can pivot and iterate along the way so that you can keep chasing the larger bucket of money that's in front of you based off of the learnings that you have. So I think the way you surrounded that is brilliant. It really does make a difference when you've got a focus, but you also start to understand the product side of it and how you can shift your hypothesis by taking the learning, getting in front of enough people that will keep shifting. So you, like you said, you went out of love into the cult and into the religion. It's a great stepping stone way to kind of visualize where your business is going and where you see it getting into that scalability side. So now we're going to kind of shift into where you are at Microsoft, and man, there's been a lot of learnings, and now you get into Microsoft, and we won't dive too much into the whole Microsoft side because really the whole impact side of being a product manager is all the learnings that you've got to where you are today, which has obviously helped you scale on investing and investing in founders along the way and helping businesses, and of course creating the podcast. And some of those learnings have really dived into this whole AI side of things, and I think AI has kind of become this massive tool that maybe a year ago, 12 to 18 months ago, it really hit a massive impact on the world. Everybody was talking about it. So Elon Musk had dropped down to number two in the most talked about thing in the world. It was AI, then maybe Elon, and then maybe Elon again. But outside of that, it was AI. And I think, you know, it's been running for 10 years. It just didn't get the same global penetration until ChatGPT came out. So now you have AI that's out there and everybody has all these fears. And of course, you have fears of the unknown and or how something's going to operate and work. So maybe we can dive into maybe sharing a bit of an explanation of what AI means to you and what it means to maybe even Microsoft, because they're one of the largest players and leaders in this whole space today, in the top $3 trillion companies. Where do you see their vision with how AI is being utilized? And then, kind of, how do you see it in the early stage space? Because they obviously are going to be somewhat different. And how do you see that all kind of unfolding? So, what does AI mean to you?
Um, I'll not talk about in terms of Microsoft, for obvious reasons. I don't want to be the spokesperson of the company, but I'll give sort of like a general view of it. Um, I think sort of from an engineer's perspective, from people in big tech, or from anyone who graduated from computer science perspective, AI and ML have always been important. If you have looked at like where like PhDs were happening, where our sort of colleagues or sort of batchmates went on to do their masters or PhDs, you can always see that ML was 50% of it. ML and AI were 50% of it. Um, but even as engineers, most of the engineers spend some time on learning what machine learning is, what are recommendation systems, right? But obviously they're not fully looped into what is happening because day to day everyone has their own priorities. I think what ChatGPT really demonstrated is that this new technique called LLMs, um, and what their potential is. So the way I think of LLMs, and sort of the easiest way to sort of put this in perspective, is this is a horizontal shift, and it's a horizontal intelligence as a service layer that we are providing across all services, across all products. So when you think of other sort of, people always think, and right now I'm seeing this sort of narrative that there is a bubble in AI. There will be bubble in all of things. Bubble is not actually a behavior or that is a function of whether or not there is value in something. Bubble is a function of its social behavior. Bubble is a phenomenon of how we as social beings and information beings are interacting with information and acting upon it. It doesn't mean that something is important, more important or less important. So whenever a new thing comes, I think the information is age sort of position itself into creating hype cycles and bubbles. And that should not tell you whether or not a particular technology or a trend is actually real or not real, or it's as important or not important. Um, and especially if you're in the cutting edge and if you're trying to predict what's the next thing, you should not actually go with the bubble or hype. You should have to sort of go in a deeper way, find the experts and talk to them and come up with your own conclusion. Why I'm saying this is because the narrative right now I'm seeing, on Twitter or some of the journalists, especially, I think there were some articles were saying that AI is a bubble. Um, that does not mean that AI is not AI. AI is not important. AI doesn't, AI has all the capabilities that it has. Compare that with crypto. Uh, Crypto is not a foundational or horizontal technology that can be applied everywhere. And that was a misconception. That was a sort of misguidance where everyone got caught up. In both cases, there are bubbles. So just because something has a bubble doesn't mean that it's not important, doesn't mean that the claims will not turn into reality. Right? Because the bubble only means that there's a social behavior, there's a mass herd behavior along with it. And but like the classic example is the internet bubble. It was a bubble, but it was also all the promises came true. It's just that not at that point of time. So even if this cycle is a bubble, it does not mean that AI is not important. The capabilities are not true. It is still true, going to be true. Like let's say something happens and stock market crashes by 50%. It does not mean that the researchers will stop working on it. It does not mean that the capabilities are going to change. The capabilities are the capabilities. We can squint our eye right now with the existing capabilities and think of all the transformations that are going to come in all the products imaginable. It is literally hard to find a sector where there will not be an impact of AI. You take any other like hype, like let's say VR, let's take blockchain, let's take any other like audio devices, like Alexa was a big hype cycle, right? Take any other niche or vertical that you can associate a bubble with. um, you can only pick, say that, hey, it will affect in this way, it will affect in this way. AI is the one which will affect everything. It is sort of like a foundational thing, and that is going to stay persistent. And it has been persistent. I think we needed to get to that stage where there will be pivotal points, right? LLM was one pivotal point. ChatGPT was one a pivotal point. We'll see more pivotal points, and we in the middle we might see that a hype cycle might, some gas out of it will go out of it. It might come back again. It might continue. Like that is a social behavior. The technical aspects are going to be technical aspects. So there might be a bubble, but it doesn't matter. For me, I think like in my 10, 12 years of being in engineering slash product, I've never thought any new technology where you can just go and say shift your career into. Like I never thought like Web3. Oh, I'll go and find a job in Web3. Like I never felt that need. I never felt the need of like when Alexa came out to do something in Alexa. or even write an app for Alexa, because Alexa had this whole ecosystem of writing apps. Because it was very clear that it was not foundationally transformative, at least from the tech lens, from the people who are closer to the technology lens. But with AI, like if anyone 19-year-old or 20-year-old asks me, I would say just go into all in AI. It's the most obvious answer at this point. It's There's no question. There's no and obviously you have to be inclined towards computer science and all those things. You have to also look at that, that whether you personally are inclined into that sort of a thing. But if you are inclined and if you are already into tech, then where you have to go, then AI is the obvious place to go. Doesn't matter if it goes up or down. It is going to have a long surviving stint. And even if you're starting a company, .ai is where you have to look at. Um, yeah, that's where I think where new innovative ideas. There's so many ideas to pick from. I think the reason we have seen this hype in venture markets last 4 5 years was and I think you'll see in my podcast also we talked about this, as there has been a dearth of good new ideas. So people came up with this niche, very, very niche, smaller market ideas, mostly like features as a companies, right? Like BNPL is sort of classic, I feel. Buy now, pay later. Like something that has to be a feature of a different company became company. And BNPL at least has big category, big GMV. But we've seen a lot of small startups when they pitch it's a feature, not a company, not even a product, let alone a company. So features have become startups. I mean, we have seen so many versions of like DocSense. Everyone is creating a link sharing where people can upload their decks. So what we have seen is like smaller ideas sort of gain momentum and funding because there was dearth of big ideas. I think with machine learning, I think we sort of unlocked a new wave of rethinking a lot of applications. Number one, and we've given this intelligence layer to every application. So this was a new thing. Like when you think of typing something and extracting what someone said was not available before, it allows you to fill gaps and create applications at a much higher abstraction level, which was not possible before. So it gives you a new way to think about existing products and remake them fundamentally, improve them, like cut costs. Like Klarna and some of the companies have given examples of how they've cut down costs on customer support, but that is just one example. Um, the economics of how it will play out, whether will the billions of dollars of investment and chips, how will they yield? I would say they will yield in the form of productivity of the world. When I see the question of like, hey, we've invested this much dollars and we need X amount of revenue coming out in X number of years, I think that will sort of slowly come up. Because even if you see data center investments, when storage, I think storage used to cost something like 10,000 per GB 20 years back. Today it's $1 per GB, right? That means what happened? We're consuming more storage than ever, from cell phones to laptops to everything, right? So the same sort of cut down of costs we'll see in AI and ML usage, and its penetration will go everywhere.
So it kind of sounds like the way AI has shaped is that when AI came out, it was just AI. And people were like, yeah, we're working with AI and over the years and they're building on it. And then once the hype machine got behind the larger release, it had more of an impact in Web3 and anything alike because what you were doing is you were taking a car and you were taking a manual transmission and making it automatic. So you had a shift in the market, but it wasn't a massive shift that the whole world had to stop and move over. You now just had two systems running and things were okay. And it was still growing and there was dollars that were going to be generated and there was value. But what AI has done is it's exponentially growing the way your mindset can look at a problem, how fast you can solve a problem, and how much more value you can tie into the end result of that cost that you're going to throw onto the customer. That people see that this is a whole different channel of revenue that's potential to come out of it. And it also does a paradigm shift change. So, like Google search and everything else, they now become almost old players because they haven't been um, shifting the way their product is working in the sense that everything is AI based and running. We now have to make this shift because people have more questions, they're not getting answers. So you have companies like Perplexity, where they're now $1 billion company. They have 10 million users. Well, why did they become so successful? Because they adopted to their customer. Their customer wanted to ask questions and not be fed ads. They wanted to be getting information at their fingertips, but also using LLM models, and they were getting information back that they could consume as that user instead of regurgitated data that didn't really fit their mindset or where they were as a customer at that time. So you start to see that this layers differently. And then I see that, tying into all the things you shared, is that now you've got AI where it's expanded. If AI was just one thing, it's now um, going into self awareness models. It has um, theory theory models, limited memory, reactive. Like you've got sectors now that have broken out into AI, whereas before it was just AI. So now you're going to see that they're going to be more productive, and that AI is going to keep branching out into many more things that it can do, and then they're going to hit a limit, right? What do I do with how do I start creating my own data now? So now they're like, we got to make up our own data because we're run out of data to feed from. So let's just
Yeah.
start having machines make their own data. So then they're going to start making up, gobs and gobs of data so that these systems can regurgitate and understand it. And it might have been 90% made up, but the point is that the systems become smart enough so that they're actually making their own data so they can start making their own future predictions because it's needed now. So
Yeah.
it's advancing at such a fast pace. Whereas like a blockchain, it was reinventing an old product. It was just saying, hey, I've got a financial system and I want to show everybody X, so let's add in blockchain. So it just became more of a bolt on than a real value add. So I'm kind of thinking that AI has just changed the whole model, whereas Web3 was like new design, new interaction, but it didn't change how web worked. And I think it maybe didn't carry the same impact as an AI has made Web3 1,000 times more efficient today than it did
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years ago when AI was kind of used in Web3, but not so much. And now Web3 is really becoming more important because AI is backboning it. So it's almost to your point where that company that you said 60% of Americans are using the company that you work for, but they don't know it. Well, today 90% of companies or people are using AI and they don't even know it because
Yeah.
it's now becoming so strong that it's tying into everything that we do. And when you see a flaw, you're like, oh, it mustn't be using AI because it's not giving me the results I need in order to make my day faster, better, and more successful. So it's amazing how that shift keeps growing. So now take that kind of quantified spot where you are. Where do you see product managers really enhancing their abilities with AI? Do they become scared of AI because they're going to lose their job? Or do they see this as an enhancement to making their role even more successful?
I mean, I think in short term, AI is overestimated, and in long term, AI is underestimated. Um, so, but if you're looking at a lens of like, how do you look at for your own career and job? I would say before AI replaces you, someone who knows AI will replace you. So, I mean, this is a technology that everyone should try to learn and understand, and how can they leverage in their product. And if you're a customer, B2C product, I think there are tons of ways you can leverage. Uh, Anywhere there is text, input output, you can summarize it, you can extract insights from it using AI. You can make support easy for you. And for knowledge workers who are, like, for example, my product management job, a lot of it is writing and thinking. And both, and half thinking is mostly writing. Like when you write, you sort of think, and you think better and you write better. That's how I look thinking is, because you don't really sit and think. um, that's what I feel like. You write to think, basically. At least that's how I view my job. So previously you have to sort of think of how you're writing more and more, but now you can just do a brain dump, and then you know the confidence that you can clean up and make it more presentable later. Like you don't have to worry about that. So if you have good thought, doesn't matter, you now you're devoid of this drudgery of how to present it well. Like that is now just a prompt, or you can use your Microsoft Copilot or a ChatGPT Copilot, whichever your company is authorizing, and just change it and be clever about it. But I think you have to, as a product manager, you have to leverage it first just for your own productivity, and then think of all the ways where you can leverage it for your product. And you'll only get that by staying up to date. And that's one of the reasons why I started this 100 days of AI project. Is I felt so strongly that this is a fundamental thing, and you have to really go and understand it much more deeply than any other thing. And that's why I invested my time and energy into it. So I think everyone who's really understands the importance should go and do that. I think take the hard pill, invest time, and learn more deeply than prompt engineering. Like everyone will learn prompt engineering. You, if you want to be better, you have to do a little bit more deeper than that, to understand how you can leverage. See the examples, what other people are doing, what are the latest techniques that are coming, and also it depends on how close you are, or how close to infrastructure, right? Are you at a pass, are you at a application level, or are you at a infrastructure level product that you're working on? So it differs on how you can leverage these things. And it also like gives a new sort of arena to rethink certain products. And I actually think that we haven't seen a great implementation of AI since ChatGPT. um, ChatGPT, and everyone like has been trying to create a ChatGPT version of it. Like every company is trying to do that. I don't think that's really a good strategy, because I think the mind space on consumer side has been taken by ChatGPT and a couple of others. When you think of this transition from Google queries to Google answers, which Google is also integrating, I don't think, unless you have a really uh, differentiation or high quality improvement in your answer, and existing search engines will do it. I think it's great that we have Perplexity, which is competing with Google, and new players always improve the marketplace. And obviously, more companies should try at it. But just in terms of like variety of products, just purely leveraging AI, we haven't seen yet a great consumer app that truly uses the new. We have seen features in different products, but we haven't seen a whole new product. I think the closest thing was Microsoft's recall, which hasn't been out yet, which is sort of interesting way to look at your own thing. What I'm personally excited is a co-pilot that really does your work. And we are really, you can squint your eye and you can see that it's pretty close. We're about to get there, where right now Microsoft, for example, a co-pilot has, you just like chat with it like ChatGPT. But in the recent announcement, Copilot, ChatGPT was a desktop app in Mac, and that is very important. Like being a desktop app is important. What is the reason why I should be a desktop app versus you're already on the browser and be able to access? That is very important when you see what is possible in the future. Is right now you're only asking ChatGPT, "Hey, rewrite this email." But then the next prompt will be, once you're satisfied with the output of the email, send this to XYZ at XYZ time. And that is tasked by ChatGPT on your desktop. And that's why being a desktop app is important. So once you get this phase to the next pivotal point is where actions start happening. And that's when I think you'll see the next pivotal point of the importance of this, is where the actions start happening. And Gmail also hinted on this product improvement, um, in Google I/O. But that is, I think, the next phase where you see a lot more actions. And I think developers are calling this as agentic workflows, where you give a task, an agent goes and does some work and comes back to it, and you review it. So a lot of knowledge work, which is like menial, and Satya has this great line of removing drudgery from your life, and the unexciting tasks that you have to do as part of your job. I think that is really exciting. It gives you a lot of productive time back to, um, be the product manager or generally any knowledge worker. I think that's really exciting to see.
I love it. And I think what to kind of summarize this is that it comes down to how you leverage it. You mentioned this a few times, how you leverage AI. And I think that if everybody has taught and learns how to use these tools, all the different ones from Perplexity all the way across ChatGPT, they can learn how to enhance their role and learn how to enhance their output. And then the backup to that is, to what you mentioned, was how to present it better, So yes, ChatGPT might not be perfect. It might not give you the exact result, but it's giving you the baseline of how to produce something that's more productive and come out with something that's more meaningful. It's how do you present that back to your audience to make sure that they understand it and they don't think that a computer built it. So there is, that co-piloting. There's a lot of stuff that ties into it, but the crux of, I think, the whole AI discussion is that it's enhancing your ability to move quicker and do more. It's kind of like 1999, Google released, and everybody's Googling everything. How do I walk? How many steps in this much time? And Google gives you the answer. Like, what we've done is we've taken 24 years, 25 years of Google and broken it down into one new structure, which is now I'm going to get fed different information, but it's going to learn from my everything, and it's going to come back with a better and more enhanced answer. And it's how do I use that when I'm in school, when I'm in work, wherever I am, to enhance myself, just like Google did for the last 25 years by enhancing my knowledge base by being able to search for anything that I had questions on. And today, now I can search and get even deeper information back that's going to allow me to be more productive and quicker, faster as a business and or as a human. So I think there's a lot of great things that are coming out of it. And to all your points, no matter how you define AI, AI is becoming the backbone to anything that we do. There may be a bubble. And if the bubble is happening, you still got 60% of AI that's going to be very functional and utilizing over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's a matter of how do we utilize it and present it back better to the audience that we're going after and try to create that unique audience.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
So we're going to transition now. After that great conversation, we're going to dive into the 60-second rant. So you have 60 seconds. I'm going to throw it up on my clock. And I will say that no one has ever done 60 seconds. So let's break the record and keep it going. But I will post the 60 seconds. And when you're ready, fire away, rant about anything. And I'm going to see if I can support it or beat it up. Ready? You're on.
Um, I think tech media in the US over indexes on what Apple does and under indexes on what Android does. I think it's their own bias of being close to Apple and Apple devices and being in the ecosystem, and sort of is not able to even criticize Apple in a way it should be criticized. Um, Firstly, I think Apple always like copies Android, um, and also it copies after 4 years. The feature is out on Android, and the tech media sort of ignores it and never seems to point it out. Um, and obviously, the users are not aware of it because they don't use Android. What this has also led to is under coverage of Google in general, which sort of created a market opportunity last year where Google's stock was down because market thought that they were not ahead of AI and ML. That's, I think, only partly true, because if you have been a user of Google Pixel, as we've talked about in the last section, the best AI is the AI that you don't know that you're using AI. And Google phone has been the best use case of AI. They've launched some amazing features, which I don't think even Apple is close to even launching or thinking about it. Um, they launched like blurrier background and stuff like that a while back, which I think Apple has recently announced, which is all machine learning and AI. And Google Photos is another great example. So I think on and on, Apple is sort of overcovered while Google Android is undercovered by the tech media, which sort of results in um, even I think we are seeing that play out in even AI and ML coverage. For example, the Apple's decision, the strategic decision of outsourcing AI and ML to ChatGPT was actually a really bad decision, and I would have written very critically if I was a tech I was a tech crunch or something about that decision. But everything is, people are saying it's a genius move. I seem to not understand why it's a genius move. It is definitely not a genius move. AI and ML is such a big thing. You cannot outsource this to another company. It only indicates that they don't have the capability at this point. to launch this. So that's why they've outsourced it. It's not even about the economics as people are talking about it, because okay, training ML models is economically intensive. That's why they're outsourcing, and it's a CFO type decision. I think it's all false. It's basically comes down to the fact that they can't do it immediately. They're just biding time by doing this. And the concept of that we'll have more choices of LLMs in Apple is also, I think, ridiculous. That is not going to happen. They will have one LLM. That will be Apple's LLM. They're just biding their time to do this. Um, yeah, and it's such a foundational technology for Apple to not be in it, right? If I would have said, if you're doing a BNPL feature, buy now pay later, and you were integrating with Klarna, that's a different issue. Like I would say, yeah, it's a fine. You can integrate with them and provide an option, or you integrate with Shopify for using Shopify Pay or something like that. I can understand. AI is such an integrated, important foundational change. And I am really surprised that everyone is saying that this is such a strategically important move by Apple by integrating ChatGPT, and also promising to provide a marketplace like you'll have options to more. And it's also a bad implementation of the feature. Every time you ask it, it will pop up and say, hey, I don't know this, can I ask ChatGPT? Like, again, that's again a bad feature implementation, which again no one seems to be criticizing. So that's my rant on tech's bias towards Apple.
Well, it's a great rant, and I'm going to say that I'm a mixed user. I have a Mac and I have an Android. So for a mobile phone, and I have a MacBook and I have been a Mac user for I don't know 16, 20 years or something to that effect. So I'm going to share, and of course it ties on Microsoft as well. So the I use Microsoft Office services. So the broad view of how we use products is obviously you're going after the efficiencies that you find are going to do the best things to enable you as a user. I'm going to think that Apple, who is the best marketing machine in the world outside of Tesla and Elon Musk, you they have built Elon has built a character himself and a business from it. You have Apple, who had built a character outside of it, lost the character, and then became about the business and the innovation and the marketing. And that has taken over the business in the massive way. Google, on the other hand, has just been in your face because all the tools and products we use happen to be in your face. So they never had to really market it. So I find that you're right, they're very pulled back on how they operate and what they do, but they have the smartest people in the world working with them. And then on the Apple side, I have a feeling that when they were building the car side, they were really trying to shift where they were going and who they were competing against. And they forgot the markets that they played in and what they were really good at. And when they shut the car manufacturing down, oddly, not too long after that, AI became a big boom. And then they had to figure out, okay, what are we going to do here? We seem to have missed the boat. So I think they've tied ChatGPT in as their go to, wow, we steal all of this information and learn how to build our own LMs and everything else and catch up. So I think they are a little bit lost in that sense. And I don't know if that's why they're marketing it the way they are and trying to make everybody feel great about it, but I suspect it'll be like a 3-year contract. While in the background, they rebuild it up like they were doing with the auto for 5 years, and they'll build up the biggest punch machine, and it's going to come back bigger, stronger than ever because that's where they're going to see and hang their hat on. And I think that that's where Google and the rest of the world will be sitting there thinking, "Oh, we've got this made. We're going to be able to win in this market." And Apple will come back in 4 or 5 years with something dramatically different that will change the world, right? So I do see their innovation being a superpower to their company, whereas Google always seems to be middle ground, and obviously other players where they're more advanced. To your point on Microsoft and ChatGPT, they're always going to be a dominant player because they were first movers, first to market, and it's really dependent now. I think it comes down to the last two players on how they're going to move in the market. And to your point, having it inside and having all this knowledge to yourself is so much stronger than leveraging outside parties. So I'm not sure if it's for or against your rant, but I think there's a 90% agreement with how they approached it and why. And I guess it's determined to see if their play moves and makes itself. But I think they're trying to find themselves again, which is who are we good at and what are we good at, because we keep coming out with new products. Some are working, some aren't. And do we have to keep being innovative in order to be Apple? So from there, we're going to move into our rapid fire questions. We're getting through there. We're almost done. All right. From your perspective as an investor, pick one or the other. Founder or co-founder?
Founder.
Unicorn or a 4-year 10x exit?
Um, 4-year 10x exit.
CPG or tech?
Tech.
AI or blockchain?
AI.
First money in or Series A?
First money in.
Board seat or observer?
Neither.
Safe or convertible note?
Safe.
Lead or follow?
Want to lead but have to follow.
Favorite part of investing?
Meeting great people.
Number of companies invested per year?
6 to 8.
Verticals of focus?
Vertical SaaS, AI.
2 qualities for a startup to stand out to you?
The ability of the founding team to write code, or how fast they iterate on writing code and launching the product.
Okay.
Just that
And
one
what do
thing.
you fair? What do you look for when making an investment?
How strong the team is and how fast they're iterating is the number one. Number two is the idea.
Okay. All right. Personal side. What is a piece of advice you'd give to founders 9 out of 10 times?
Um, you're seeking truth in the market, so be flexible.
Do you have any philosophies or rules that you stand behind?
Um, Personally, create, focus, see what's your consumption, and turn consumption into creating. So if you're listening to a lot of podcasts, create a podcast. If you're consuming a lot of shots, make shots. If you're reading a lot about stocks, invest in stocks. If you're reading a lot about startups, go and create one. So convert consumption into creating.
I love that. What tech will define the world in the next 5 years?
Um, Probably AI, unless we make some new innovation in nuclear energy.
Who is your hero, mentor, and why?
Um, Not one hero. I sort of am against having one hero. I think the problem, it becomes, I become part of a cult. But I have like people that inspire me in different areas. In investing, for example, I view towards Vinod Khosla, who's always stood out in terms of being and investing where the puck will eventually be, instead of following others. Um, I like Scott Galloway on his thesis on how to approach things, and in generally his humorous way of putting out things and presentation style. I like Sam Harris for his way of thinking about free will and atheism. Christopher Hitchens a little bit about atheism. Um, yeah, who are else? But yeah, I have different people, but I don't have like one person that I really admire.
Those are great choices. Big fan as well. What is your favorite investment?
My favorite investment. I invested in this Indian company called Newton School, which takes or which basically takes new students without any fee, or they might have slightly changed the model, but initially without any fee, and they guarantee them a job. So they train and make them ready for a software engineering job, and basically get them hired. I mean, India has a 1.4 billion population, and unemployment is a huge problem right now. I can't underestimate. I mean, it just blows my mind every day. I keep thinking, how can you employ this billion people? And this is a small drop in the bucket, but I think I like what they're doing, and they've been quite successful at it.
I love it. All right, now we're going to move to the personal side real quickly. Favorite movie and what character would you play?
Um, Favorite movie? Any Denis Villeneuve movie? Recently, Dune. Dune One. Um, I would play the character of the director. Uh, um, Probably not in the movie. Um, Big fan of science fiction. Three Body Problem was amazing. Um, Sicario by Denis Villeneuve was. I mean, I watched that like 10 times. Um, yeah, I think those are some of top of the mind.
Great, great flicks. Favorite book?
Couple of them. One is Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley. Basically, it's important for me because when you grow up in India, you grow up with a mindset of scarcity. But I think the Western markets are about abundance. So it made me sort of shift my mental model on thinking from scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, from a zero sum game to playing positive sum games, from sort of being not collaborative to being becoming collaborative with others. So it's a fundamental shift in the way of how to be an optimist. So that's why it's a important book. I mean, there are other great books like Super Intelligence is a book which is a collection of mental models. I think it's a great book for anyone who's trying to improve their thinking. Um, you know, there are other classics like Charlie Munger's mental model book. I haven't read that fully yet because each mental model I try to sort of live with it, so I never get to complete the book actually. Um, but what else? Um, yeah, I'm not remembering other books, but yeah, those are top of the mind.
Perfect. Favorite sports team?
Unfortunately, I don't follow any sports these days.
Not even a cricket? Ah, that's fair, fair, fair.
I'm actually surprised why my friends are still following cricket. Uh, I actually don't like. I mean, I'm not into any sports these days, to be honest, except for CrossFit. Um, yeah, I really don't watch any sports. That makes me socially sometimes puts me in a difficult situation. Sports is a great way to
It is a very
talk to
good way to
people.
interact. Agree with
Yeah,
that.
and I know like friends who follow sports primarily strategically for that reason. But I tried
I'm one of
doing it, I couldn't get to it. I mean, I tried.
that's just consuming data. It's more data. All right,
Yeah,
cake or fortune cookie?
cake or fortune cookie. Fortune cookie.
Superman or Batman?
So Batman,
DC or Marvel?
Marvel,
Football or football?
football. So both the same for me.
Wow, American football or football? But football. All right, Elon
Neither.
Musk or Oprah Winfrey?
Neither.
All right, last question. What is your superpower?
My superpower is being orthogonal. I take different things from different fields and apply into different things. I learn what I learned from startups and apply in big tech. I learn what I learn in big tech and take it to startups. I learn things from storytelling books and apply it in my product management job. So I think that's sort of like the meta theme. I don't know if it's superpower, but I try to do it.
I think it's a superpower. It's you're also very inquisitive and great at diving into subject matter and then sharing a lot of subject matter expertise. So it's been
I would say
great.
curiosity. I would say curiosity
They're
instead of
perfect.
orthogonal. Yeah.
I think that all ties together. So it's a great collection of to add into your tool belt. But I want to say is Nataraj, it's been brilliant getting the opportunity to chat with you today and to dive into everything from AI to your background to everything that you've been able to do up until this point, and very exciting. And we're big fans, of course, of all the things you're doing. And the way we like to end our show is that we like to give you the last word. So anything you want to share to investors or to founders, we turn it over to you. And please share how people can find you as well online. And again, thank you for your time.
Thanks, JP. Thanks for having me on the show and giving me this opportunity. Folks, anyone who wants to reach out to me, you can go to my website, thestartupproject.io, where you can find all the details about all the works that I do. and also my contact information. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter. My email is sindamnataraj@gmail.com. It's my last name, first name at gmail.com. And I'm always looking to, invest in new companies, have great guests on my podcast. So if you think you're that person, feel free to reach out. Or if you just want to have a fun conversation, feel free to reach out. That's what I think internet is made for. I believe in meeting, like-minded people. So I'm always open and, giving my time for that.
I love it. Well, keep being a rock star, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Okay, that was a great conversation with Nataraj. I really enjoyed the deep dive through AI and talking just about different ways that you can look at companies and look at the way innovation is shifting in the world. And some of the great points that he made that I really want to emphasize was understanding your customer and how they use your product. I think a lot of people tend to just build for their own solutions. And I think we need to really take this hyper focus, even if you're year 5 of your company or year 10 or year 1, going back and sitting down with your customer and learning what your customer is doing, how they're interacting with your platform, what things could be done better. I really loved how he said, log out of your system, go back in a few days and log back in and see if your system is just as easy as you felt it was the first time when you built it. You'll probably find that you want to change things to make it more convenient, more accessible, whatever that is, but take that time. And then the other side was, just managing interactions, and learning how the impact of your product is and what it's doing for the communities that are working on the system. Other areas that were pretty cool that we dove into, which was niche and unique. Build a unique product, which will create a niche market, which will allow you to sell in and build your tribe. And in his analogy, he took the tribe and translated that into a cult. Build up the 50, the 1,000. It went from love, being in love with 2 people, to being a cult of 50 people to 1,000, and then from the 1,000 you get into the religion, which is you're now starting to amass a lot of people. And that comes from learning the product, learning how people use it, interacting with people. And while that's going on, look for the signals. What are the signals that are telling you that your product is aligned properly to the community you're selling to? And I thought that was just brilliant, catching the little signals that can make a difference on how you sell. And then, of course, learning where you fit in the market and figuring out who your tribe is and who wants to support you for building such a great product. True product manager, and he shared a lot of great insights. So thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please feel free to share with your friends, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and or please follow us on Spotify, Amazon, and or Apple. You can find us on all social platforms, including LinkedIn at Supporters Fund. Your support and comments are truly appreciated. Please visit us at supportersfund.com or startup events at openpeoplenetwork.com. Thank you and have a fantastic day.